Begin La. Thank you for
Oh,
teaching.
yeah. Good morning. Yeah.
And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for translations. Welcome to anybody online. We'll begin with some motivations.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one that's gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one godly bliss, no other world supreme guide means to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paid 7 strides and sat supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, excellent, spotless moon, like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Thabkhe I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. No holy field, endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a rod, a flame, a lamp, an illusion, a drop up to a bubble. A dream, a flash, a lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of psychic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn on Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your true body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Iram Guru Rana Mandala Kamyataya. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
또 딕송겐라.
Oh, yeah. Moderation. Order. Katiyan kasere. Umajuba session kamera. Deyan umajuba lera. Paten dawa tabe. Kanze rawan juji tineba. Keten dirdan zimbar meshina. Yasalo ya shawan jujuwa tele shine kange lowar yur. Shesung bataro. Tanda ngarazu tenjo umili toba sonza. Ane chendi chibu tanda mayimba. Kiwa chima penze tanda kandisi tu samayina. De tu bala rawan yore sera. 규디 랑하게 쪽에서 자꾸 마음 바꿔반도 마도 데부디 랑하게 여버시라 규디 사차도 에네 거 랑하게 말이지 규디 왕게 로야라 간제 랑하 주시 에네 소소 랑하 여버 마셔 예예라야 그리고도 tengi 강가 창거를 송거라 간제 랑하 주시 튀네 봐스 다들 고급 강가 요래서 소소 삼로다에 수송문의 창구가 참마창 현지문의 창구가 참마창 tengi 참마 진짜 고급들이야. 애네 저 심한테 땡데도 땡해버시. 사람이 고바 단단하시 최초에 고바 공내 고대 앞에 어찌 토바시네 지하고래 선거라. 그땐 들다 점반 메시나 야사를 말로와. 내소숨라 말로와지 사람이 고바야. 진투버시 거래 마음 말로와지 아껴투버시 거래 선거다. 그땐 들다 좀 메시. 야사로에 상황 조주나 telesine가. 그때 내 손으로 실 마야라 로사서나 아니 단단하시 kuga 말아 그때 뒤단 야설로 시험 주는 텔레시네 강게로 대치 치사로 마음반다 제약게 말아 다소서 수익ገብ도 그래 겸게요 말아 탑시요 말아 그냥제 대라 뒤에서자 단단 튕기 사 가가로 예바데 kuga 야부디 취수도 마소하시 텐데시세 kuga 당신시네 아니 저쪽으로 송도다 야
So here, as it says in the entry to the middle way by Chandrakirti, when we have this kind of state of freedom, this life of freedoms and endowments with all of the kind of conducive conditions, if we should fail to take advantage of this, then what will we do if we fall into the abyss of the lower realms? So here at this time where we have this kind of life with all of the sorts of freedoms, particularly the freedom to be able to create the kind of causes that gives us sort of a freedom or an autonomy with respect to the results that we will experience. So once we have created a cause, we don't really have freedom, right? We have to experience the results. But right now we have that kind of opportunity to engage in the Dharma such that we can ensure we have another good rebirth. We have all of the kind of conducive conditions in terms of our environment with respect to our own situation and with respect to others. At this time where we have all of these kinds of conducive conditions gathered, we need to make sure that we secure again in the future a life like we have now, a life as a human or a god, where we can continue to progress, continue to develop, and to ensure that we don't fall into the abyss of the lower realms. Falling into those kind of lower states, we won't have the sort of opportunities that we have now. We will be in a place where we don't have a kind of protector, right? We have to just suffer. We don't have any sort of protection. So here, as it says, while we have this kind of life of leisures and endowments with all of the conducive conditions gathered, we should take advantage of that. If we fail to take advantage of that, then falling into the lower realms, what will we possibly be? How can we possibly get out of that situation?
뭐야 들려왔더니 배치하는 송구도와 배나 단단가라서 국가 비협의 건디 밑바우지 소수 팀배 유일한 내내 소수 맨두바스에 던더바 주에 가래나 대주에 국가 비협의 세거나 지난 밑바우지 소수 농발을 내내 소수 다좀버 시러와 다오더비나 좀거나 좀봐 던더 맨두바스에 더바주 가르치네 제 국가 비협의 세거나 디고 그 가게 마시시 되나 에지마 디다 송바든 가서 단다 대주 밀리토바도 샤도 아미 바오직 소소 팀베 유나 네바나 시데스 다소소 멘데바시 데바트에 가리나 대치에 국가 요리 팀이 간거 상기 요리 선거라 다때 맞아 디 가서라 당지 마셔시 들어야지 저치마 내손되지마 lon소나 애니 미바오데 라과 강바도 수 담제 롱바 미미 롱도지 코란다 팀베 이가게 메바 동바제 유셔나 시데시라 다티도 가게 시야요 마라 네가 요 마라 전줄 깨서나 티가게 시야요 마라 그렇지 사야다 토치 세제시 거리네 티마토시 딜레 타르는 것이 교치마다 편지 최초에다 가서 미게 왔어야 동에 교화 쪽에 그 딜레 삼로 코토에 요 마라 진행시 차를 했은 거라 This was at the Bajas called Esra. Now, what is that? Geshe de Narazul Geshe de Sedelia, Miki Jula Savara. What does a papa, Talian Rosadwangas? When the church to see Shiva. Oh, to the Geshimuchi with what Geshe. And take on any detail. Don't want me that Chaju Sem that said to the Savira Tapsitatos Jambina. Already order. Tanda one equate, make it you want you are to ya take a chuna. The church to some machuna. Oh, take the abush to che. Teacher in any Joshima had a make of us, the church about the gains in the church and the out of chair. And then I go on the Kibun Jada, Kibushan Butakanga, Toya, Toya Kugabiara, Tisuara. Oh, to this was a Tanda Tenikasura. Joshima Son Metua, Lada Miko, Chichinecha. There's a Maiba, Koya to Media, Lada Miko, Matea, Mesola Tutico. Deve dentro sace ora ma ci tanto me mambo ora tiende la da mi rala rame va pumbu dole che ko batile ka thara si chasan te ranche bu thara si ba mai ba rang thara si be kyuti ka ga shemba she te shemba na she ne semje shenda risu ma she ba pama ma ji be semje me nyen ne to ma ji be semje me de sangmalya semje tamje ya ran gi yamsalam ba na she shalya tene Pendo Tuni, Simja Tamjak Tum Gakusha, they could then get Kasashi like you are Chasam. Did the some Shimbutangura, did Tanda to me Yomaranga, Jungumaris, Samjumara, Tanda Kajumar, the Mauba Junga regular, Tanda Jumbati Tubati, Matubati, Mayulishane, the Netisha, Keba Mambo. I was a person of Subanese. Chanju sem said to the Geva Mambu Gona get to Tukurese. No, Geva Mambu Gona get Tukurese. Kajan Gona. The troop that is Tarabura Shivsete, but to the Kage Mavsite Maroa. Chanju sem gets at the Chabadan Yajikun teach the Shandi from the Koran Pekarsora. Give it all of our Yitzimdar Shusite Mado. Timhado Bado Kage to that maybe some Tiretio Marwa. What he did Zaco. Give Chungo and drink that Sibylam the Rebbersane. Roa Jacusi and they could then get Casasili was a teacher to Tandane. Janarina said, Yandarina, Julaki, Tapsil Babyism. Teacher to Sisi Jankare. Yende Topsi Yendekare, Pisanal Sumbana Shigi. Till a Tobata Samba Compassion Dichupashagism. Guru said and his number shows, or did it?
So here, the example that is applied to this is like at this time, while we have all of these opportunities, all of the conducive conditions and freedoms, it's sort of like we're a heroic being, a strong man or strong woman who is able to like vanquish their enemies, accomplish their desired aims, and remove those kinds of undesired situations. And so here, if we take advantage of that, we are able to accomplish as we wish, particularly with respect to the future. But if we took that hero, that strong person, and tied up all of their limbs and dumped them in some kind of isolated place, they would be totally unable to do any of those things. And so here, like that, if we are thrown into the lower realms by our karma, we basically are just going to strive to get our sustenance, find food and water, but we can't think about the future. We're unable to contemplate virtue or to recognize what it is that we should do in order to benefit our future lives. And so here, while we have this kind of situation with all of the kind of freedom to practice, all of the conducive conditions, we have met with the Dharma and so forth, the most important thing for us to do is at the very least ensure that we have such a rebirth again. And so really this involves the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, engaging in, as we saw earlier in this text, the 10 virtues for higher rebirth rebirths. And so this is something whereupon that foundation, we can also try to develop, plant the seeds of generating bodhicitta and understanding emptiness. But really the main thing is to make sure that we have another good rebirth where we have the conditions to meet with the Dharma. We have this kind of freedom like we do now in order to continue to develop those kinds of paths of the being of middling scope and the path of the great scope. And so to have that opportunity in the future, we need to hold as our foundation that ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, engaging in as much as we are able to those kinds of dharmas for a higher rebirth. And so here, even if though we are to gain a good rebirth, it's a good rebirth as a human or a god in comparison to a birth in the lower realms, but there is still much suffering involved. We all can see that. And so recognizing that even if one takes such a rebirth, it is subject to the sufferings of samsara, going up and down and casting off these aggregates and so forth, we generate this kind of attitude of wishing to be freed from that cycle of existence. And this is based upon knowing what causes lead us to be born in this kind of suffering situation. But it isn't just us who is in that kind of situation, but rather all sentient beings who have acted as like our kind mothers and fathers. We should look out upon them without any sort of partiality and wish to be able to benefit them as well, get them out of this kind of cycle of existence, bring them onto the path. And so with that kind of attitude, one thinks, may I myself become a being who has eliminated all faults, who has developed all good qualities, and thereby is fully able to be of benefit to other sentient beings. And so here, this is something that we hold as a goal. We hold those kinds of practices that we can't engage in now as something that we are striving toward. I mean, when we talk about bodhicitta, this is something that takes a long time, can take eons in order for us to develop, but we strive towards that however long it might take. And along the way, we develop love and compassion, this kind of altruism toward others. We shouldn't think that, oh, I'm not able to do anything until I reach that state of Buddhahood, but rather we are training in stages, and along those kinds of stages, we are able to be of benefit to others. We are developing our qualities, eliminating our faults. And so with that kind of long-term goal in mind, we think I am going to remove each kind of fault, each kind of obscuration. I'm going to develop each of the kind of qualities, good qualities that are necessary to become a being who is fully able to benefit others. And this is as it is described in the text. And so here it is based upon knowing what these are that we pursue that kind of a goal. So here we should think that we should set our motivation for listening to the teachings, setting as that long-term goal, may I become a Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And for that purpose, I'm going to learn about the kinds of faults that I need to remove, the kind of qualities I need to develop. And I do this based upon listening to the teachings and then taking them up into practice. So please set such a motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh, yeah. That is the Juju Ripshit Sarva.
Mm,
Juju Ripshit Sarsoma.
Rabshi Sarmason.
Yeah, oh, yeah, and oh, yeah,
Chukchuri Sumba di Saso.
yeah, yeah, oh, did it. Oh, Tanga to Tiritana. Yeah, oh, the Tan did it. That is your Pichanalia. Kaya Tonga Mebane Tonga Tamba was set in the order. Tonga Mebase. Tonda Karshegurisena. Tombani round to Truba Yuma Yushabachidi. Kaya Tonga Yomaro. Kaya Tonga Metu Tonga Mebate. Tongdora Kaya Tonga Mera. Round to Truba Yuma Session. Session Kaya Tonga Mera. Sa Kaya Tonga Mebane Tonga Mo. Tombani Tonga Res Shegara. 어떻게 계란한테 대신 대전은 그냥 통화 매번 내 통화 담보 쓰기도 이 계란이 동반이 통화 쓰지 또 세라 근데 시도 된 거래스 거라 또 걸는 게 알아 그냥 통화 매번 내 통화 담보를 쓰기도 되네 계란이 통제시 동반이 생겨지 통화 지시 시에 되기도 돼 거래스 거라 가서래 전에도 봤을래서 왜 이번에서 그냥 통화 매번에 통화 담보 없이 시 다네 샤고사 마이남스 디코 동반이 세대 코 때네 딱 봐서 샤마도 통했지 또에다 신야지 그요 말와시 텔셰기요 말베스 거라 동반시 지실 때 권한이 통하시 지시네 때 권한이 동반이 통스 야지 통해 레버를 시기도 야지 그냥 통화 매바데 네 내로 통화를 시기도 등이 된데 지금 도와서기도 도바사르도와 어디래 다들 도바 바세고요라 지나세 법에 냠샤나 돈이 또배 이시 뒤제기 뒤와 양 도바마니스 오 동반에 또디사 네 법에 냠샤시 동반에 무슨도 또디사 네 가서 동반에 또배 시바 매바 많으면 지금 말했어라 가야 통해면은 통계 시바 용마로 동반에 또배 시람 동반에 또배 시거래시고라 딱 봤다 땜 봤다 지금 라와도 주배 동계에 된대 연구 말아 도시에 요 말에 동계 연구 말아 이내 그 대지를 버리고 좀려 동계 시바시 샤오래스 심다 심주 초하던 도시다 시도냐도 제네 대지 제네 동반이 생기게 넘버 10 법에념 샤시를 시바시 샤오래스 거라 냠샤 동반이 또변 뒤제기 뒤배 뒤제기 뒤배야 도버마스 딱바다 찍보다 라와도 주바틴데 기 동계기 유요 똑제 유요 말에 동계 셰바 용구 말에서 야 지단 셰바 가야 메세 동계 셰바 가야 요 말에 동방에 시도 가야 통해 요 말에 세텐데 또다 말에서 와라 두제기 뒤바 도번 마와네 말에 발로베 리퍼트면 도번 마와네 시질로기 루다세 무대 쳬바바 주마세나 삼자 세반데베 야 꿀립 첨부인 것이 벌써왔어. 그 무대 쳬바바도 저 코로당아제다 차도다 또 봐서나 근데 샘코라 매버샤고 그래서라 샘이 체제될 거 차다다 코로당아제다 근데 매버샤에 그거 말했어 샘코라 랑시인데 지레시오라 나라제는 코로당아제를 소버도 샘비랑실을 주고 말와 지코 랑시인데 그 코로당아 다에 요버지 로 차당을 소번이 못한 죄나 세시르고 샤네트버지 something 요거라 어디서 거라 대네 김마세는 선비아세바 인세 대가 저 그나 다도 짐바르지 다도 짐바드 매바 차선에 셈세르고 말어 담에 또 벌어서 버티데 시바테라 당진디 매바 차그라 다도 짐바라도 주베 시바티 매바 차그라 마도 시다 시바 매바 차고 말어 티시도 오야 어디실랍니다 담 마운트
So here, then picking up in the text with verse 364, and here this is the second topic, which is identifying the mind realizing emptiness. And so here there might be a kind of doubt that arises because it is said that the seeing of nothing whatsoever is seeing suchness, or like the holy seeing is seeing nothing whatsoever. And so examining, when we examine whether or not there is some kind of autonomous inherent existence and don't see that, the not finding of that is said to be this kind of not seeing. And here there's a misunderstanding that can arise in that, well, what does it mean to, like you say, you see emptiness, but then there's also passages in where it says that the sort of supreme seeing or holy seeing is seeing nothing whatsoever. And so when we try to explain that, it kind of asks, is this something that is there no sort of object of that an Arya's meditative equipoise? And so here, as it explains then in the beginning, this sort of introduction to this verse, again, if there is not the seeing of anything whatsoever, this is said to be seeing suchness. And so how is that? What does it mean to say that this kind of mind, and again, this is when one has examined whether or not there is some kind of autonomous inherent existence and not seeing that. Like if there is nothing seen within an Arya's meditative equipoise, then is there a mind that is seeing that? What is, so someone might misunderstand this as being like there's no sort of consciousness whatsoever. But when we think about the kind of even the mind of an Arya in meditative equipoise, there is a dependent origination, right? This kind of mind and mental factors, feeling and so forth, that observes that object of emptiness. And so here one might say that, well, in the meditative equipoise of an Arya, the sort of consciousness, the sort of wisdom that realizes emptiness is the opposite of something that is compounded. So because the kind of object of emptiness is something that is permanent, then what is it exactly that sees that? What is the nature of that mind that sees that? And so here too, it asks if, it's a kind of statement to say that one, by eliminating ignorance, eliminates mere knowing, right? This is the kind of view of some schools like the Mimamsakas, who would say that when one extinguishes the various kinds of faults of mind, that extinguishes mind itself. So they would say that things like our anger, our jealousy, our attachment, when we exhaust those, when we extinguish those, then the mind itself is extinguished because they see those as being the nature of mind. However, in this system, we wouldn't say that those kinds of afflictions have penetrated the nature of mind. Those are not the nature of mind. The nature of mind is clear and knowing. And so, although through the process of realizing emptiness and selflessness, we exhaust that kind of grasping at a self, but we don't exhaust that mind's capacity for awareness. So here, in order to counteract that kind of view, the assertion of schools like the Mimamsakas, who would say that the exhaustion of the various afflictions entails the exhaustion of the mind itself, we should know that to be a great kind of deprecation of the nature of mind.
뭐야? 지당 알아도 지당 미 삼도 나고 초신에 때리 시바간 거 매번 속에 소리지 통고도 nga samsang nga ji shukshimba che omar ane nga se chakpa shensha chi kiwa ma ane tangwa che ya omar se de de me chowa me wara chana shi ma do tinde chaya kawa yore samsang tengdo nga ra che ne kongdo tanga je da chado da shikka nga yundi ka nga samsang rangwa do tinde chik samla shi me na ne kake me ba simbe chakdo sa tinde sori ko sem다 nyamu nyedi chikpa chasana ni nyamu de sesona sem kora nyamu ngoyina nyamu sedu sebe sedu yora te kyonzu te samdang yora sem kora kodo ngaje tado de mebe shiba kora yo maru sam yora ane kodo ngaje tado to menda ne sebe sedu kore tema sene sem nyabdo se kore ne kaya mebe chana sadratine o tinde sabdu yongdo sa tinde mare se sem nganjin da ra chagdan da tu so de sem seri de yora chagdan me ba da ngao nya bolo shukchim bu mebe sheba de gyön de shebolo ne sheba de gyote du yora samlo tan dan de gyote ma do sheba kora mebe shane ni chik de mebe shade ta ya ja ke mebe do tinde de yo mara o tinde me do sam tikön do sam je pa mebe shade ni shenda ne lu ngone to to ra tong ba ni de china ra adu tu ba nga sam da nga de namju sam de midwa sam de o ta de tinde sam de nor sha sam ta nga de ra mi du te ji de ban chu te ne ta wa sam chi ma do mi du sam ko ya yo ra o ti chi lam ya o ti
So, in general, when we have a strong sort of like a grasping at an I, this sense of an I, or strong kind of like clinging to a self, a strong attachment, a strong aversion, and so forth, sometimes we might think that, well, if we get rid of that strong grasping at an I, if we get rid of this strong kind of our various afflictions, our attachment that clings to things, and our animosity, and so forth, then like what will be left? There won't be any mind. And here, if the mind were the same as our afflictions, then that would be the case. But that's not the case. It's not the case that our mind is those afflicted consciousnesses alone. If we have, but it can feel to us like it is that way, that if there weren't any of those kinds of minds that we're so familiar with, like our grasping at an I and grasping at various things with attachment and animosity, that somehow eliminating those would eliminate consciousness itself. What would there be? But if we get rid of that grasping at an I, if we get rid of our attachment and our animosity, we change our way of thinking. By seeing those things as faults, we are able to eliminate them. And so no longer do we have that grasping at a kind of autonomous self that exists in and of its own right, but rather we still retain the kind of clear and knowing nature of mind. That is not eliminated through eliminating our various afflictions.
뭐야, 다들. 다다 자와된 것도 다시야 돼. 관계 통화를 줄시나서네. 통화 매번에 통화 담보서는 시간에 통계 매번 말했어도 근데 가래 통그래서나 통계 쉐버도 쉐버라. 관계 통화를 줄시나 단위에 돈에 줘봐 돼서. 근데 심중 매번 세면중 때문에 아직 면도도 어디래. 통계대 그 때지 레버 좋아 잠도 그 샘기 통계에서 오라. 샘생게 되대 대야 초하다 지금도 시다 지금 심중다 레직도 깨봐도 지 심중 시에매게 초매게 두시매게 시버시 영화에 엄마라. 근데 그 때지 레버 좋아 지금 통계 시버시 요래 당에 잠도. 또 텔레 동반이 통스바 당에 따 대잠도 요마. 대담바트르베 통계 시버 요ten데 요고 말해서 거라. 관계 통한 교신은 당에 돈에 셈을 줘서 당에 잠도 심중 매발 셈이 줘서 셈 생게 되고 술에 때문에 거기 시장장고 생긴지 로가라 지금 아마도 거라 심중도 저라 때진 될내네 동번이 통 시라 초르세라 지간가 연구하라 어떻게 그 때지 되버는 좀 삼비 통계기 시바요 아래서 라와도 tuba 통계 시바시 코라 짱짱 지부게 통계기 텐데 이게 라와도 tuba 수기 통하대 요 말했어라. 이 맨하고 땡지 되버는 좀 시바샤네 지기 동반이 통화 통계 좀도 통하셔야 요래서 더담버 tuba 통하셔 담배 통하셔 되게 요 말아 강가 추탐지 시버라. 요들 관계 심동 유르시나 시바 관계 통하르시나 tanye donde chebade tanye tamdo 동번이 통수샤 그래서 심중 매버 sem중 심중 매게 매베 sem제요 말해서라 근데 심중을 떼진 되네네 시베 또보다 시바다 서로다 식대서 연구샤오라 그러니까 심중 매버 sem중 되네 레지 멘데도세 라와도 투베시기 대요 말해서라 근데 제가 오늘 관계 통화를 교신에 더 담배 담배 통해 셈자 더 담배 담배 주로 민지서 라도 주베스 통계게 셈지 요 말이셔라 타녀도 더 담배 담배 아닌다도 베스 통해 파괴 냠사 계시 주로신 계시 요래서 거라 타녀도 셈라 주스타된도서 겐가 제바데 더 담배 담배 통화 그것이래. 대답을 당에 잠도 통화돼 심중다 대진 relwe 권내는 보조 통계 시작으로 대소다때 법의 냠사식이 동반이 통화돼 시작으로 해서라. 대답에 대바 통화 줘봐대. 대양 때내 시작봐. 삼인지 라신기 주바 매서. 그 라신기 주바 주는 심중라 마드네 코라 심장장게 라하가 돈에 또보다 시바다 서로다. 는 진대시고 거라 두시바다 되자. 어떤 데요 말에 심중을 뜻인 될래니 semte te to yo de sa simjo me ba sem me jo shin se sem me ba ya simjo me jo sem de me na ya simjo yo gumaro ko chikjil te jin de ni ko shiba yidur shiba ra shin de ko simjo yin ge ji ma do simjo me ge sim ka ge che ji yo ma de se go ra ra shin ji du be ra shin ji du be te me ba se sim yi ji tong wa rāngshīn kī trūpē tēn mē bā sēm yē kī sēm tōngā mē tē sē kāshī nā mē shī kēntā shik tī lō tāṃ mā tī mē rā tēyā tēnē shākvā sāṃ yē kī rāngshīn kī trūpē mē tē sē tī tī kī tō sēm chū mē bā rā sēm mē chū wē mē chū shē sēm mē bā rā sēm chū mē chū wē rāngshīn kī trūpē tēn mē lā sē rāngshīn kī trūpē sēm tā sēm chū mē gā tī yō mā rē sē rā sēm yē kī sēm tōngā mē tē sē sēm kōrāng kī sēm tōng kī mā rē sē rā tī tōng bā nī tōng kī sēm tī kī kōrāng kī yā kōrāng tōng kī rā sē tī tōng mā rē sē tī rāng rī sē ngā chī kē lēng kī chī wā rā tī kī chī shē wā rā shibā tī tōng kī ngā shibā chī nyam tō yā yō kō rē sē kē kē lēng kī rū tā mā yō rā nā mbā sā kē pā rā tī kī chī sō mē chē mō kī rāng lā rēk pā rā mē rēk bē chī rā mē rēk bē chī rā sēm yē lēng jī yō wā yā sēm yē lēng jī yō wā yā mē dō tō wā sē tī rē sēm yē chē mō tī kī shiāndā lā rēk tō gu rā Kurang lā rēk tō gu mā rā tī yī tā kō sēm tī kī yu shiāndā rēk tō gu rā sēm rāng kī rāng rēk bē chā tī yō mā rē sē wā rā rāng kī rāng rēk gu mā rē sē wā rā rāng rī sē tī yō mā rā kā chī kā rāng rī mē nā nī tā pā kī tō gu mā rā sē tī rē tō pā mā bū yō rā tī shī mō gō shē sēm mē bā rā sēm chū mē tī tī sā rāng shīn kī tū bē mē bā nī sē tēnā tēnē shākpa tsam yīn kī rāngshīn kī tuwa mē tē sīm chū mē bā rā sēm mē chōng sēm mē bā rā sīm chū mē chōng wē rāngshīn kī tu bē tēn mē lā sēm tā sīm chū kā nē rā sēm yē kī sēm tōng wā yā mā yīn tē sē sēm khurāng kī sēm tōng wā yā mā rē sē rāng kī rāng rī bā sē sē rā rāng rī sē sō mē chē mō tē pē tē lē sō mē chē mō tē yē rāng lā rāng kī mē sē sē mē sē kī mā rā shiān lā pā rēk tō gu yu nē rāng kī rāng lā rēk tō gu mā rē sē tā tī kāng kāl chā yā rā rāng lā mē rēk bē chī tē sēm yē lē jī chōng wā nē mē dō tō sē sū dā jī shiān sū nā sū shiān kēng shē bā chī yā sū shiān kēng shē bā kōrāng shē bā chī shē bā nī rā rī tā yu shiān rīng kē tā kōrāng rīng kē nī nyam tō kē wā yō mā rē sē gō rā tī yu nā nī rā rī yu chō rā shē bā rāng kē rāng rī bā tī chō rī mē tō rāng shīn kī tū bē mē tī sēm mē tsē mō rāng lā mē rēk bā tā sēm yē lē jī chū wā nē mē tī tō sō tī tī kī tō yā tī chī lō nā
So here, then identifying the mind that realizes emptiness, again, in the context wherein we say that non-seeing is the supreme form of seeing, it's not the case that there is no consciousness, however, that perceives emptiness, but there is a consciousness that arises as something that is merely conventionally designated. It arises as a kind of dependent origination together with the various mental factors. So here it says in verse 364, but who does this seeing? Well, conventionally, the mind is said to do so, but without mental factors, there is no mind. So there's not like an isolated mind that autonomously perceives this kind of emptiness in and of itself without being dependently originated with the various mental factors. And so there is a merely dependently originated, merely dependent conventionally designated mind that is what apprehends this object of emptiness. And this is something that is merely conventionally labeled or designated, which is the case with all of phenomena. And so here it says, since the mind is unreal, we do not accept that two moments of mind can be simultaneous. So here, again, the first part of this is distinguishing that, well, what is it that sees? Again, kind of refuting the wrong conceptions that can arise from this saying of like non-seeing is the supreme kind of seeing, and thinking that the mind, the consciousness perceiving must, well, what is the nature of that, or how does it exist? That kind of sort of doubt can arise. And so again, it's not as though there's some sort of inherently existent mind independent of the various mental factors that identifies this object of emptiness. So there's no sort of autonomously seeing mind, but it is rather something that arises as a dependent origination. And so the mind that sees this ultimate truth, it does not itself become an ultimate truth. It is, and conventionally it is said that awareness of meditative equipoise on the ultimate truth in the manner of the disappearance of dualistic appearance, that awareness being produced and ceasing moment by moment. This is something that is a compounded phenomenon that arises and disintegrates. And this sees the ultimate truth, which, by the way, is not a momentary kind of phenomena, but this is something that is posited only relatively, only conventionally, and is not inherently established. For without mental factors, mind does not occur, and also without mind, mental factors do not occur. And so this is getting at the fact that the mind that understands, that realizes emptiness, is itself something not inherently existent. If it were existent in that way, it would have to be existent independent of all of the various mental factors, but rather those arise dependently, contingently upon one another. So without those mental factors, we can't have mind, and without mind, we can't have the various mental factors. And so the mind that realizes emptiness or realizes the ultimate is itself something that is a conventional truth, and is realizing this in the manner of that dualism having disappeared, but it's not itself become the ultimate. And so it is the case that, again, these occur relatively contingently. There isn't some kind of autonomous mind that is inherently established that realizes this sort of emptiness. And so too, again, getting at the fact that the mind occurs only with its various mental factors, but not independently of them. It's the case, too, that the mind doesn't see itself. It is contingent upon an object or dependent upon an object, but the mind does not see the mind because, as the example is given, the tip of a finger itself does not touch itself. And moreover, it is asserted that two minds, it is not asserted that two minds can occur simultaneously. So here, this is really getting into refuting the idea of a self-cognizing consciousness, that there is some kind of consciousness that observes the mind itself. And so there are many Buddhist tenet schools who accept that there is this kind of self-cognizing consciousness. And here, this is not something that is asserted. There are some who would say that in order to have memory, particularly of the experiential part of consciousness, you would have to have this kind of self-awareness or self-cognizing consciousness. But here, this school would say that it's not as though the mind is able to know itself. It knows various objects, but in the same way that the tip of a finger can't touch itself, so too this applies here, that there isn't the ability of the mind to see itself. So if, for example, we have like a visual consciousness apprehending form, there's no second mind that is occurring at the same time, as in a self-cognizing self-cognizing consciousness that occurs simultaneously with that. So that's here where it says at the end of this verse that since mind is unreal, we do not accept that two moments of mind can be simultaneous. The mind occurs contingent upon its various mental factors and is something that we can't have two minds occurring simultaneously, as in there's no self-cognizing consciousness together with that mind.
yeah. Started. Niba tekba chichu nige kasake tungni chamo to gobar temba se tiretwa. Nyende yu tekba le shube kasa ina daro. Rangye yu tekba le shube ina da karina. O ti tarba tobalya tongba ni to gores. Tekin ta nyende ta rangye tekba sum kangala tene tachumbe debu kuba toku yana. Ane tongba ni to gores. Tishe doa. Tekpa chichu nige tekin다 땡매니가 이게 가사기 동이 참 또뭐 충분할 말라 니스도 타바점 더 말라 동이 참또 그래서라 타바도 녀모베 녀모 세베 녀모레 타베 녀모 세베 야 어디 더 말이야 아니 동반이 또 그래서 타바점 더 말라 동이 참또 그거다 대과 지중 비켜버렸어 다들이야 지당 두다마 마부시 가시기야 택매야 저기 때문에 다가 참부터 또 봐요 말을 돼 근데 여라 대신 야 쇼스나네 동이 참부터 그래서 얘도 란게도 동이 참부터 맞았네 야 자주베 데부터야 여르셔라 근데 kelenge 두다마 여러나 베두다마 대전하시 말했지 오마 tenjuelo 봐 오마 tenjuelo 시작해나 얘는 때문에 람라슈네 타바토나다 대제지 람라슈네 타바토고 네가 동이 참내로 참부터 또 그랬지 마토는 네모세도 말했지 셔가라 어디인데 가서 네가 택과 시중 이게 가사게 동이 참 또가 충분할 바라니 타르와점 토발라 동이 참도 그봐 시다 타르와점 토발라 동이 참도 그래서라 랑은에 주베 동바 라시지 주베 동바 라와도 주베 동바 세데 오마 태조가 세 동바니 뜻도 그래서 타르와점 토발라 동이 참도 그봐다 특별 시중 그 개발해서 어때네 주다마 신다 커지시네 네 태매다 대신이가 그 자준배 대부터 벌 동이 또 그네 그니 개발습니다 와서 개발 그래 시기 마스 지시거라 근데 개발이 신다고는 제어를 뒤시거라 개발 시중 그 개발로 다 담보내서 또 그거 시거라 개발 시중 그람 갈레슈네 타르와토 벌야 동반이 또 그래서 저리니 타르와장 토발라 동이 또 그거 다 담보더라 또 그거데 대다리한다 지신도 싸워더라 대다리한다 지신도 로아 때문에 시내네 주미바의 메신도 내면에면 양인데스 그래 대다리한다 지신도 로아 때문에 시내네 양다바 동반이 양다바 그거 전담내고 시내시거라 주미바의 메신도네 교대세도 그래 당신들면은 라와도 주변에서 받으면은 교세도라 주 매매네 가서 주 매네 대부 연구마로 주미바에 매시도 주 표신 매바야 매 연구마로 지나시 동반이 또네 당시 세서는 녀모세도 그래서라 녀모께에 내요 말이 시요마 내매내매 니껴와 코알이 껴와링 말에 양엘엔 대도 동엘엔 대도 동엘에 타도 그래서라 지다 대바이 어디도 그들 양다 지다와 신도 로아랑 신지 주베 매바라 신에 내서도 그들 양다 신도 로아 때문에 신에 내세대 가실에서 그들 양다와 지다와 신도 로아랑 신지 주베 매바 신에서 된다밤 양다와 로아랑 신지 주베 매바 신에서 된다 동반이 돈서라 신에네 아니 주매베 매신도 세바 세바레 시바인기래. 시바인나 미시다가리. 너야 이미시. 깨베 주메베 시테 가시. 양시바 양시바리 깨베 네메베세. 양시 렘반 메바리 양멜렌다바 토바 토바리 조라 이노사. 슌데다케니 니라라야 동니 참모 또바 예발라 세월 때라스 어디 답던다 년대다 라게 거리나야 타르바토발라 타르바토발라 녀모 방구라 차단라 소베 녀모 방구라 녀모 방발야고 녀모 계사가 시디 예도와다 예도메와 차단이 되시 예도와다 예도메와니 라와도 주바지 토네네 차단기요라 이 랑원에 주바 이동화도 랑원에 주바시 도산 샤바기요라 이 가서다 이도 메모랬다나 그 이도 메모와 당화께서가 따대야 라와도 주바시 내시르치 도삼 타시 도삼 진에 대삼나네 텔콘트기요라 파소소섬 때네 딱바 참처를 샤삼나 엔테르티 기고 말도 소소섬 기바 도시 디마티카리나 텔 딱시 메다르스 텐바 딱바 참처를 샤삼나 녀모 기고 말바 어때데 녀모 세발은 녀바도 차고 유랑문에 줘봐도 땅에 유랑문에 줘봐 김해바도 씻고요라 김마시네 고차다께 되요라 음악은 좋아하시잖아这些的 대단히 한다고 하시신도 좋아하는 신경 두배 때문에 바로 시에내니 교매배 메신도 아니 그 교당신디 동반이 무슨 또네 아름기름 전에 나도 제바데 세선 아니 세바 콘도 당가지를 손님모신데 사무실도 그래서라 교매배 메신도 아니 시바르께 교매배시 시바께 교디가 말하니 시바께 말해 시바 마 코알 마견다 아니 트라좀 버려도라 양 시바르께 네메베 양시 렘바메바 티 동반이 또네 당시 봐서나 네 양시바 렘바르 네요마 시요마라고 세바멘데 통와라 렘바메바 냥멜에 대바 토반주와 인노스 슌데다 기네 녀랑라야 동니 참모 또바 예바 세와르텔라스 어티버티 시큐나
So then next, it turns to how it is the case that both lesser vehicle practitioners and greater vehicle practitioners are equal in realizing subtle emptiness. And so here it then has a couple of different points, being that first, in order to attain even mere liberation, it is necessary to realize subtle emptiness. And then getting to the kind of distinction between lesser and the lesser and greater vehicle. And so here, according to the Prasangikas, one must realize subtle emptiness in order to even attain the state of an arhat, in order to attain liberation from samsara, because it is the kind of exhaustion or the extinction of the afflictions that exhausts samsara, leads to its extinction. And so some of the lower tenant schools would assert that those who are traveling on the lesser vehicles, that of the Shravaka and the Pratyeka Buddha, don't realize the subtle selflessness of phenomena. They have a different kind of a realization, and it's only once they enter into the Mahayana that they then develop that understanding, the realization of the subtle selflessness of phenomena. But here it is, according to the Prasangikas, necessary that even merely for attaining the state of liberation, the state of an arhat, that one needs to see the subtle emptiness, the subtle mode of abiding, or the subtle nature of reality in order to attain that state. Because it is really based upon recognizing that all phenomena are empty of existing objectively, inherently from their own side, that one is able to eliminate the cause of the various afflictions that lead to repeated rebirth within samsara. So here, then there is the second point of, well, if it is the case that both the lower vehicle, the lesser vehicle, and the higher vehicle both realize this kind of subtle emptiness, well, then what is the distinction between them? So that will come later. But it is the case that for even those who are pursuing the path of a hearer or a solitary realizer, it is by eliminating that kind of self-grasping. When we get rid of the cause, we then get rid of the result. So here it says then in verse 365, having properly realized that in this way beings are actually unreal, having no basis for rebirth or any appropriation of new aggregates, one attains nirvana, like a fire whose causes have ceased. So when a fire has no more fuel, then there's no way for it to continue burning. And so too, it is the case that someone who realizes that there is ultimately no inherently existent phenomena, they eliminate the kind of cause that leads to repeated birth. So like that, by realizing emptiness, by realizing things as they are, it is that knowledge of there not being any sort of inherent existence that leads to the cessation of continued rebirth within samsara. There's no sort of basis, there's no cause for continuing to take birth. There's also no sort of basis for continued birth in samsara, no appropriating of aggregates, and thereby one attains the state of nirvana, passing beyond sorrow. And so here it is the case, again, that by recognizing even hearers and solitary realizers, in order to abandon the afflictions, we hold things as being sort of inherently or ultimately existent in and of themselves autonomously. And then we have objects that we perceive as being pleasant, and we hold them as really, truly pleasant, or we have those that are the objects of our animosity, and thereby realizing that these are merely dependently designated as such, that our mind perceives something that's either sort of in accordance with it or some against the way that we think. And it is then that we grasp at them as having that we grasp at them as objects of our attachment or our animosity. And so it is through directly realizing emptiness that one eliminates the cause for those afflictions, for animosity and attachment and so forth, and thereby won't be born in samsara. There will be no basis for rebirth, no further taking up of various existences, like a fire whose fuel, whose cause has ceased. And so here, this is the case for even those who attain merely the state of an arhat, hearers and solitary realizers.
뭐야? 다들 공장도 돌래. 동반이 또 그배. 태매기 남래슈는 자수배 때부터 나다. 대제 남래슈는다. 동반이 예바도 또 그래. 스틸 공장도 돌래서도 년도지 살아로반 되배짱 시소 당하세. 년도지 살아로반 되배짱 시러지 파도도 심벌 좀 봐서 서치어라. 년도지 살아로반 되배짱 시소다. 강다 대신 년도 토바를 말에 강다 대신 년도 조를 자냠나 시소다. 녀랑 남르던야 타바토고 삼바이네 동번이 또 그래서 시소다. 신다 라마 참도. 택바 멤베 되는가도. 택바 멤베 돌레서 다 태매긴 도날이야. 동번이 댄스지 구겨라 공대. 산제 태매래 치기다 메송이네 태매긴 도날 송구라. 티치래 송 태매 송면은 그지 동번이 또 메고스로 차라. 그 태매 되는 날에 동번이 송요래 산제 진 도가르스는 아니 태매기 때문에 수네 오아터 반다스. 시소 도이 템바 이노세 수니 오아터 반다스. 수디 오아터 슈나리아 보르 실라지 용구도 어디나 시소 수니 오아터 반다 소아추이 추분다스. 수다 소다도 참아야시도 수니 오아터 반다 소아추이 추분다. 두신 메규다 보든 두신 남네 추신신 나바시바 규마다 미메냐지 까체도 센도시어라. 되게 동반이 시작도 공태 장겨라. dole suni uwa tuwa da shiso doi tenpa ino se. Ta nipa ni tikshin ki nipa ni teni tekpa chenpo nyangde ki wandu che so shinas. Oya, ta ti suya te ko tekpa chenpo nyangde tobe wandu che so shinas ya kachik dabar shinsara. Nipa ni teni tekpa chenpo nyangde tobe ti suni uwa tuwa da se te tekpa chenpo nyangde tobe ya ane tende kowa de se tingwen do na songa de mato. Tingmen ba tsugu tashimbe drebu towa la ti gongore songbo ma re se na se ora. Kachi de she tende kendo ma re se. Nipa ne tene tekpa chenpe nyangde je wando che so she na se. Tsawa ti yungu da ta. Teta chanchu senpe kyang, tongne chanchu nyefan de. Teta chanchu senpe kyang, tongne nyefan de. Ti ma re se ora. Teaching want to send so but mares, and the thing may you want to send so mares. Soon the water at the said, don't buy shed, Sigora. That I change you send back and so my say, Sheba also. Oh, that change you send back, and so my say, Sheba also. Don't buy ye, Tone, so we change you never, Toban devil also. Ona take by Shimbo, ona take by. 시족이 개발 시시나 개발 지시 여신 자주 선바 야 코아라 레베 주 매번 교로시나스 다코티 다텐데도 야다 돈다 수네 오아도아다 세테 티제기 자주 선바 원투션 셰르스 테마르 테메 원투션 수바레스고라 대다 자주 선바 야 토네 자주 네번데 전에 오메게 tene nyingji bashige chanju bado sinjamsha ala ti tamade chanju sembane ko ala karche negyo aresi gora ti nyingji wange ko ala negyo aresi gora chebachi nyende ge chebachi wa tombani tone sobe chanju do nebar toban de ba osa dona tekba 시중에 개발 어느 다 가려서 너도 원하다 나 대바 시중에 개발 간디시기 맞아 다 동방이 또 받는데 강가 니가 리워라 개발 가려서 와라 지시 지예 지미 자주 선바야 코르 네베 매번 주루시나 아니 자주 선바되게 동방이 또니야 당시 방사선에 코르 네가 말와 titanda kuala negdo, senju samba, shendu juwe chido kuala negora, ti karesi gora. Tene nyingji telen jagdo sikan chimani de. Tene nyingji bashi ge chanju badu senzam chorusla. Chanju samba kuala ne, kuala simjangi tanda juwe chido chinga ne kuala negyo desti. Nyingji da malamu wange nga kuala kyo shosye. Genene simjen tuya tendo che yungora. O ti tonda nevar mato. Tongbanyi to ne tanda tuya mato ne kwa nevar tende maare sivara. Tene nyingji bashi ge chanju pato senzam chorsa. Sanje kowan todo pato pe nyawa kasere. Kwa liya genis kwa simjen nam tazu tanda chenis. Shugyo de ti kwa liya tang nyamumbe wangi tende maare se. Nyingji da malamge wangi. Negyo reso. Tene nyingji bashi ki chanchu bado senzam choro. Choro se tisha. Ta kyo me de chanchu samba tene jabar da. Tete kyo me de se chanchu samba tene nyingji bashi ki chanchu mato ge pardo sibal nyingzam choro ide. Kuala kyawalin te yore se wara. Le da sebe wangi kiwani Mahayana sosu le sa ni kowa kinchi le sa ni ti wangi rame ba kowa le kiwa tende maare sara. Nyingji da kowa le nebe simjen te zule nyingji da rwa. Molam je ti tanda nga kowa le nene simjen ki tentu shito ba shose molam jabne. O ti nyingji da molam je wangi kowa le nebe yore sara. Yo ta tishitu na 마음을 매는
대면배 대нул레 디 양결 숭로나
그게
대파 멘벤 대눌레
글쎄요.
식제 차장
직제돼서 왜
어
다른 전주 선배 그냥 통나 전주 예반 들으래.
말에 디 강마디 쿵창네 여러와 대면배 대눌레
에? 시각이세요. 대다리 한다 지신도 들으래.
야, 디 올라 쿵창 여러와 아니 대파 멘베 대눌레
응? 다시 그래. 그래서 이 말와 대다리 한다 지신도 좋아 때문에 시내네. 금이바에 매셔도 내밀내밀 향해도 된대서
no
어야 다들 마음으로는
사와
그다
말에 다슝 디다 기스 다택 택챙기 돌레 숭바 여러와 양 택멘베 대눌레 숭바디 숭니 우와 도와다
예. 야 어야야 안돌레 년도 이제 살아로 되게 장세 되르베
음
어야야 음 년도 이제 살아로 되게 장 에네 동반이 공부를 시켜라
나리로와
이거마데 식디 마장서 년도 이제 살아로 되게 장 시럽지 바로도 좀 자오시오라
나리
어제는 시소당하시라 강다 대신 년도 주버를 자냠나 시소다 강다 강다 태매지 람라 슈니르와 대신 년도 주버를 자냠다 대소인의 동반이 공부를 띄워도 있어라 시소 시실로도
음
그래서
다 대파 멘베 대눌레 계랑 식제직 창 여러와
아 순에 우와 되어간다 그래
디
어디
차장 장투기에나?
알레와야 딸란도네 순에 우와 되어간다 소아치 주부다 시소스라 순에 우와 되어간다 수대 지금 뭐지 소안에 소다들나 보아들을 거라 어디나 시대 순에 와다 소아치 주부다 소아대 추위 주부 추네 추미를 때는 야 무엇이야 깨운 것도 추럽시야 내는 것도 추미 사원에야 추태원도야 무물에서야 태양이어라 소아추이 주부다 누시 미규 따부대서 누시디 미규 가서래 제마다 사건부터 요살이 니만
야야야.
아니 그 사도 추나신다 아버지 통구라 그래서라 누시 미규 따부대 누치 남네 추신신 누치 분부대 추신하시래서라 추신신의 깨래 동부들에서기도 와 아따도 동부를 지어할 때 이용원에 동부 누구에 타고 누구에 따가서는 빡빡시지마도 요 말아 빡빡시는 빡빡이 아래 마도 되게 땅부 통하나시 그 동부 타고 그러시 통대도 요 말아 두시 남네 출신시 남버 세바 주마다 남시대 주마나시래세 지편에 유랑문에 요만하시지 낭대 요한테 원에 보다가 돈에 랑문에 줘요 말아 주마ken기 두시 땅라도 주바나시 나도지 통대마도 통하나 싶게 매버시래서 되게도
지기도 더 공단.
어야 안돼
So here then following this verse 365, it then quotes a source of how it is that it is the case that even Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas need to realize subtle emptiness. And so this is elucidated both in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, where it says, and it's not all quoted here in the commentary, but it basically says that from the sutras, those who wish to train in the grounds of a hearer need to pursue or make an effort at realizing the perfection of wisdom. They need to make an effort at realizing emptiness. And so even for those who think that they are going to solely pursue the kind of activities of a hearer and a solitary realizer, it is necessary for them to strive to realize emptiness. And so those who are striving for liberation alone, it is quoted in both the sort of scriptures of the greater vehicle, as well as, and then there's a quote that comes from the lesser vehicle scriptures. So we shouldn't think that it is only taught in like the perfection of wisdom, those scriptures of the great vehicle, that it is necessary for hearers and solitary realizers to realize subtle emptiness. But it is also here then in the scriptures of the lesser vehicle. And this is what I was asking Geshe to clarify, wherein there is this kind of passage that says that form is sort of like a mass that is accumulated. It's something that's not actually existent in and of its own right. And feeling is like a water bubble. Discrimination is like a mirage. Our karmic formations are sort of like a banana tree, and consciousness is like an illusion. And so here, giving all of these examples of something that appears in one way, but it doesn't actually exist as it appears, even in the lesser vehicle scriptures, we can see that it is taught that it is necessary for those practitioners to realize subtle emptiness as well. So here, this scripture that is from the lesser vehicles also asserts the necessity of realizing emptiness. And so here, it's not just the kind of Mahayana scriptures that assert as such. And so then next, turning to the next topic, which is the distinction, the difference between the greater and lesser vehicles. One asks if it is rather due to their reaching nirvana, or the sort of nirvana of the greater vehicle. It says then in verse 366, the first half, bodhisattvas, having also had this realization, become firmly intent upon awakening. So it's not as though there's a kind of distinction in the realization that they have, or the state of nirvana. But here, when it comes to not bodhisattvas, not just hearers and solitary realizers, see emptiness, and so they strive for to definitely attain perfect, complete enlightenment. And then so it asks, well, then what is the distinction between the lesser and greater vehicle? And so, and why is it then that bodhisattvas continue to remain within samsara, even if they lack the sort of causes that lead to renewed rebirth? If they have exhausted the afflictions, then how is it that bodhisattvas continue to remain within samsara? And it says then in the second half of verse 366 that it is due to just their compassion that they continue to take rebirths until awakening. So there's no fault here. It is rather the case that bodhisattvas, solely due to their compassion, continue to take rebirth within samsara until the point that they attain a full enlightenment. And it is due to their great compassion that they do so. It is not the case that they are taking rebirth due to karma and craving.
뭐야, 너네 다 그만했었나? 어디인지를. 뭐야, 또 안에 대과 치중의 개박가를 시기도 동반이 또 어디 간가 개박이나 오늘 대과 치중의 개발 지시 유해지 전주 선방야 고아내배 교가래서나 안에 지시도 대과 치중 개박가를 동반이 또 먼저 안전도 왔어요. 안에 개박 전주 선방의 고아내배 교가래서 전주 선방의 당지 방사를 당지를 써봤죠. 동반이 또 내기나 로 안에 녀모를 써봤죠. 세나 당도 전주 선방 고아내배도 뒤가래서도 시나서 tenin yingjin ba shiki chanchu ba du sinsam chos. Chanchu samba to yingji tam balam ge wangi Koa kiwa malam tab ra, koa konge simje to nyingi masune te che to tunge da trawa che to koa la kunzu nyamdo pa koa kone chibare che ene che tembal so ga tinde che usamne koa kiwa lange wa ma to le ta nyamu be wa ke nge ba yo ma re se gora tene nyingi ba shi gi chanju ba to sinzam cho siba koa la cham cho gre se sinzam cho 또 땅마들 내줘다. 자주 선바되니 니지 바시기 자주 마토게 봐도 시바 니좀 저러 얘기해서 레다 시베왕게 레다 시베왕게네 시베왕게 레다 녀무베왕게 지라 녀무베왕게 저 말해서 그래. 그치구나. 그치.
So, here again, with regard to the distinction between the greater and the lesser vehicle, if they're the same in realizing subtle emptiness, then what is the kind of distinction? And so here again in the second half of verse 366, it is due to just their compassion that they continue to take rebirths until awakening. So here there's no fault in that bodhisattvas, although they have abandoned the grasping at a self and the various afflictions that arise from that, it is out of their compassion and prayers that they are able to take rebirth within samsara, that they continue to connect with births within samsara, but not the case that they take rebirth due to the power of karma and their afflictions. Rather, although they have the kind of same realization and have eliminated that grasping at a self and the various afflictions, they aren't taking rebirth within samsara due to that, but rather due to the power of their compassion and prayers.
Oh yeah, that tebachimbe tene tebachimbu ke melingi tende ora. Oh tezuke shodo niba tejingi tene ponga kagwala nise. Tebachimbu te sanje kamarese. Sanje sunye de tembashi kone chusun yongja che nyendo da rangye da kange nyamsolan yo tirese. Temado yang tebachimbu tene se lawachi sun yomarese. Ti gomboluru la sobati sosha de mato sanje kamarese nge ora. O te kichi ora. Niba tejingi tene ponga kagwala nise. Tebachimbu tene de sanje kamarese pange tozu tanda shegwa. Ni kebar sheba da, tanda tu tambu kebar shen, tanda tu tu shegin. Ta kebar sheba tala tunzen shi kuni shegwa. Tichingi tene ponga mirikbe kyusen shiksha. Tichingi tene katruba, tichingi tene tozo sanje yi ka rese. Kunzu sanje ka marese gora, sanje ka rese roche. Tenmengi tene ne sheba, tegwa chenbu lamde, soba mimba, tenmengi tene ne sheba te kanjanchana, te lamdan debu, chasama yonsu soba chi yongyo marese. Te kan tejin de nena mato chasama chi yongo marese. Mimba ta tegwa sum tenbe kuwa si, tegwa sum ten kuwa sanje kuwa kares. Ta tangbo dere da, tangbo de tejin ke tene ponga kawa ni kebar sheba te. Kebar sheba te le nindwa. Tejin la mebe nimi tegwa chenpo tene tozo sanje ka marese. Tende katanga ina marese labi ina te nimi chenpo rese wa. Tejin la mebe nimi se. Tos maata so ale tangma de si labshana subjects ya.
So then next is really refuting the kind of abandonment of the scriptures of the great vehicle. And so here, when it comes to there are those that sort of forsake or abandon the scriptures of the great vehicle, the Mahayana, saying that, oh, this isn't something that the Buddha taught. I mean, the Buddha taught widely to many disciples the various scriptures of the lesser vehicle, but did not widely proclaim the Mahayana. So there are some that sort of disparage those teachings or abandon them by saying that this is something that was just made up by Nagarjuna and others. It's not actually the case that these scriptures are the speech of the Buddha. And so here first is a kind of extensive explanation that is divided into the reason why it is not suitable to forsake the great vehicle scriptures, and the faults that come from disparaging or deriding those various scriptures, and kind of therefore why it is unsuitable or improper for someone to disparage the various scriptures. So here, first, the extensive explanation then is divided into 4 points, which again is the reason why it is not suitable to forsake the vehicles of the great scriptures, establishing that the Mahayana scriptures are the speech of the Buddha, and that it is the case that from the explanations of the lesser vehicle scriptures, one is not able to, one doesn't sort of perfect or complete the path and the results, and therefore the reason why the 3 vehicles are taught. And so first here we have the reason why it isn't suitable to forsake the Mahayana scriptures, and this then is divided into why the sort of faults of deriding or disparaging the Mahayana, and therefore why it is not suitable to have kind of animosity or look down upon those. And so here this is further divided into 3 points of the way in which some disparage the great vehicle, the cause of that disparagement, and the faults of that disparagement.
뭐야 다들 당한 들다 것을 담불라 니세 팀에 티제라 매베 니미세 다 대가 침베 때네들이야 산제가 말해서 럼네티 니미 침부레세 대가 침부사거래서 거라 저나 당ар 미릭바세 미릭바다 티제 때네들이야 당부체네 어디 산제가 말해 티날 에셰도 템바 말해서 시그라 어디서 다 당불 좀 당부데 라 티치라 매바 니미셔더라 대바침 between 산제가 말해서 매는 니미션 보드에서 당부데 거려서 대바침 볼라 매베 매바다 대바침 볼라 매베 취당 어레 매베 주다 매베 니미소 대바 숨셔도 대바침 볼라 매고베 교가래서 대바침 볼라 매베 매취데 가르치는 매고요래 말해서 지금도서 때temba 말해서 가르가르셔야 된 temba 말해서 그랬어라 근데 매고베 규sen시고라 매고베 규sen시 근데 매베 님이 어때 매베들 님이 첨부래서 다 담보들이 오야 어때 subject 좀 말랍잖아 뭐로르신데
So here then again, the kind of fault of deriding the Mahayana is divided into 3 topics. The first is the way in which some deride the great vehicle, the Mahayana. And so it's something that is a great fault to deride, to disparage the Mahayana. It's something that it will cause you to incur a great non-virtue for those who say that, oh, this isn't the speech of the Buddha. What is taught here isn't true, and so forth. And so first there is the way in which some deride that. There is the cause for such derision, and then the faults of doing so.
뭐야 다 담보 되질라 매베 취디셔도 되질라 매베 취디 이 간도스네 싸wan데르도 티신식베 티신레 상주선베 초대나서 전에 대라 군도 몽바다 라도 타에 매버치세 티실라 매베 티센데 셰도와 티실라 매베 취스네 메도라 티실라 매베 드메도스 때템바 마르세 라고에 돈다 가르세나세 어때 티신식베 티실레 상주선베 초대나서 전주선바세도 공심제 탐제 동일에 대외시도 산지에 고바 토바 차버려서 진짜 땡기어라 chanchu sembe tso tena se. Tela kundu mongba ta rabdu tanga meba se. Teba sembe tene kapsu sanje karison arsina. Tishin shikba tishin chanchu sembe tso tena. Chanchu semke tsu ta, chanchu semba tso ke keba mambolya. Chimba tsuti soba samdena soba. Chinso paru chimba chula lomne. Ne sanke tsuti shekyo da. O tele ya teni deyo ma de se. Chanchu sembe tso tena se. Tela kundu mongba ta. Kundu tawe meba se. Tute ha kukuya mari abu se hama kuse. Ene te hama kuse te sanje song ma de. Nyente ta ranje tekwa le lakwa chigi. Sa tekwa chimbu se sheki sam tiche ne. Tela tangbu chigi ore se. Tangwa chigi ore se wara. Maga chigi ore se. Meba che se. Sholu ka tuju tuk timba tira. O ti tawa koran treba kepshane dikdo. O di dewa de tishin shikbe tishin ki tene le chanchu sembe tso nyi sunam de shiki tso nyi le sopara chimba tsure chinso paru chimba tuna dura tso nyi kebar tena se tekba chimbe lamde tsokwa de la kundu mungbe nyende teba namsta nyende teba chitra mawa ta tsure ya lamla shungente keshe yo mara tanda 되게 딱 건조 죽다마 년대 땡이 땡들 라고요. 텔레바 가고 싶어라. 근데 몸배 년대 대바남 랍도 당에 매버체도 어서 텔레 당고 당하지 지도 마신 버체 지도네 마신자 대사je 까이세 되면 도서 마가시 그래서 야 되지람나 당부대
So then first coming in verse 367, we have the sort of way in which those beings deride the Mahayana. And it says, the Tathagatas taught the Bodhisattva's collection of merit and wisdom in the universal vehicle, but it is derided by those who are confused and antagonistic. So here, the kind of collections of the collection of merit and wisdom, the trainings in the various six perfections and so forth that are done for the sake of attaining the state of Buddhahood, for the benefit of all beings, training in bodhicitta and then the wisdom side and these six perfections, not understanding those well, not having an understanding of the complete path and result of the Mahayana, those who are ignorant of that, who don't understand that properly, those of the hearer schools, having animosity or antagonism towards those, then sort of deride them. So it is out of not understanding the various kind of teachings that are particularly with respect to the two accumulations of a bodhisattva, the accumulation of merit and wisdom, and engaging in the practice of the six perfections and so forth, due to their lack of understanding with respect to that complete path and result of the Mahayana. They have this ignorance that in turn leads to this kind of animosity that creates their deriding, disparaging the Mahayana.
Oh, yeah, so good. Mombe Junin did that, Mombe Judy Shakwa, Mombe Junin did that in this, Carasana. You then turned the Meshibams, Sawatera. You then turned the Meshibams. Casorna Chanju Sembe, Rangi, Rangi turned the Lutan, the Shankitan Bashi, Jay the Chanju Sembe. 냠솔에 쪼들이더라. 더 대화 멤버스는 주단 현대의 제고를 랑게트 쪼라. 랑게트 쪼치오를 맞아. 뒤쇼래 안에 현지대 쪼를 맞아. 랑레 현대 현계 쇼시저의 오마라. 저 자주 semba 그 람냠솔인데 가르는 것은 자주 semba 랑게 더 땅내에서 랑게 된다들 땅에 현지된 것이 룰레바. 룰레베 된다스. O tindigo mara, shangi tenpa si lulene, shangi tendo keba mambo ne, sonam jetang ishigi tsosa, shimba tanga, chikingo tanga, kaga tanga kune, tsangma leo tanga tumke, Tende chegore shenji tunda rampe kari na le tanto chegore o tende yahe mebe sunde samko kira dente jabata sosigota tutama kashike chanju samba range ta ne shenji tan bashi lor lebe yende ta randin bashi lor lenji shala nebe ke da ne meshibe yende ke don doshibe kanchu samba rangi ten le tanda shenji ten bashi lor lemba te sonza tichi yon toya yon mari samgyara randin bashi lor lenji shenla nebe ken da mishibe yenden la kendo sheba kasi o tendo sa tambu tendo do kanchu samba rangi ten le tanda shenji ten bashi lor lemba Lolembe yönden teçerwa. Ben teçildi mara. Ki yönde könda meşibe altaçı köndi çera. Yönden de köndi meşibe ongin gorsedera. Randın başı lorulence şela nebe kö ta meşibe yönde la köndü döşebe yana yönden la tama tāngā tekwa chenpo, yondēla tāngā, tātī tekwa chenpo, rāndē bāshī, rāndē lō tāndi shēndē bāshī tuwa tē kēngē marwa, tē kō kēng yondēnde liā tē kēng tu tēne, mē kī yore sar shirē tō, yondēn kēng dō shē pāms, tē yondēn rī mātō tē kēngē marwa sirwa. Yāna yondēn tāngā shīks, yondēn yīne hā kōna tēle tāngā chēwa rē sīwara. Tekwa chela mechi chanso, tekwa chembolo mebe kyusentende resamera. Nika leso, lule chi shanlibe, tichi. Tawa shi, yondele tawa shi, tekwa chembo mechi chanso, tikaga ne tekwa chembolo mebe yoresi wara. Kyusumbu dedale, shen mebe chirosa, tichin la mebe, yönden la dāngwa chidari yinshīn la stādi mārī tīma tātī wāma tāmāti tāndi chī lakshana chūsumda shikdwa yönden kyönda mēshī bā āms chīkshā yönden kyöndu dūshī bā chī nī chirwa yānda yönden la dāngwa shī tī sumdi rītadwa dāngwa shī tikwa chī la mēshī chakchira kādi kōni tā mē bā chī ārēsi wara simchen tambi rāndē tsō mē bā chī shēngi työndu rān lō tāne shentung bashi tuyate chiretwa. Yonde kyonda meshibe te yonde rimato ti kyonke marwa. Ti meshibe wange. Yonde kyonda dushibe yana yonde te kyonde ti kyonde mara kyonde dushira. Yana kare yana yonde tawashi yonde ina ti yagu medus tawashiba. Ti sumki kare kone megu yorese. Ti sido ya ti chilamna.
So, Jigsaw.
Oh yeah.
So then in verse 368, this describes the causes for deriding the great vehicle. And so here, these are the causes that lead someone to disparage the great vehicle. And it reads then, those who deride the universal vehicle either cannot distinguish good qualities from fault. So here, bodhisattvas give up their own aims and willingly take up solely pursuing the aims, the benefit of others. Now, in the case of someone who is pursuing the lesser vehicle, they do things for others on the side, but really their main focus is their own aims, striving for their own aims. And so taking up willingly, having cast aside one's own aims and one's own pursuit to take up willingly the benefit of others, willing to give up. I mean, bodhisattvas are willing to sacrifice sacrifice even their own body in the sake of pursuing the welfare of others. For some who are pursuing the lesser vehicle, like it almost seems impossible. They think that that can't come about. And so they don't see that as something that is a quality, but rather they see that as a fault, or they aren't able to distinguish what is a fault and what is a quality. And so here we have the first sort of cause being that those who pursue their own aims alone, and don't see the faults of sort of harming others, are not willingly taking up the benefit of others. They're not able to distinguish then between faults and qualities. Or maybe they actually perceive qualities as faults, as it says in the second line, or here, the third line in the English. Either they cannot distinguish good qualities from faults, or they mistake good qualities for faults. Like they see something that is a quality, like pursuing others' aims solely, as something that is actually faulty. They don't think that it could come about, or they think that it is something that is actually a fault. And then, or alternatively, as comes in the fourth line, or else they despise these good qualities. So here, the three kinds of causes that lead someone to deride the universal vehicle or the great vehicle are really the not being able to distinguish between what is a fault and what is a quality, or they perceive something that really is a quality as being a fault, or alternatively, they have a kind of animosity. Even if they recognize that they are qualities, they see them with a kind of derision. They dislike those qualities, and thereby that leads them to really deriding, disparaging the universal or the great vehicle. Dirish. Dire.
연대도 당와 지다른 신호다 티실라 매버데 연대리아 당부지 버려서 연대를 와고 티실이 연대 말았어요 말아 라레 셰게 쳐왔으니 심지어 셰 니리 매봐 딱배 셰게 봐 말아도 참장을다 소소 쳐로 전에 소소래 셰다 계셔 집에 깝깝을때 용그라 밤아르데 부부터 배서나 삼소소 레게 쳐왔지 용거라 용거라 또 전주 선바데 다음에 셰치버서 셰 정말 개발해서 거라. 심지어 탐절이야. 이런 맹게지. 심지어 임배 잠지. 소화 개발들 동에 medebe 소화들도 연계지 인치제들 개발지에 말아 그런 된다 주의를 가리는데 집어지게 하는 거 삼로마도 그도 이나 띵이런 개발요 말아. 어떤 데 거네 봐. 근데 셰지 때도 고 연대래도 알아. 근데 들려 다들 연대를 매봐 근데 시기도 시기도 특바 특실라 매봐 연대를 다 지다린 신나스 시기도 샬라 네바 뽕다네 샬라 템바 연대도 샬라 네바 뽕한테 연대를 봐서 지다 그 남배 추기 시딩사들이라 샬라 네바 샬라 샬라 동해 연구를 스티드가 말아 샬라 펜도 쪽으로 샬라 템바도 대원도 와서 대화 연대 템바 쪽으로 진리기 다들 같이 좀 한번 연구라 같이 삼을다는 네바 탐제 방고 봐라 연대 대화 타신부터 봤을 때 전주 선발마도 연구 엄마라 심지어 탐제를 란래 같이 왔으니 셴이 그 탐제 파파네 라 타바도 탐제 김에 봐도 연구 버시하고 섬겨라 뒤던달 라베 단다 코코치 대고 내때 데베 심슈 연구하라 아다 텐데티 연대레네 텔레마가 제시 엄마라 티태관 멤버는 너값 소야 말아 자 텔레 학베 연대 삼레세 닝도 텔레 학베 연계서 레테바 신부터 떼고 요라 그 매너는 그 영어 씨버라 매일 일도 생겨대 미래를 소설에서다 계셔 찍도 안돼 샤왕게 콘도왕게 가져왕게 진짜야도 와 뒤에 장주 삼박에 장주가 섬게네 때를 하고제 영어라 대한 섬전에 개발해봐 섬전 이버 섬기지 마다 미래 개발요 마 줄로 개발요 말에 소소 벤토마도 벤타마도 개발요 말아 어디 인데 가서라 제가 택바 첨부라 몇시 위원데 당시 더 들어 티셔츠 너 티실라 매버 연대라 당와 지던 교시 나스텔라 버다다 샤라 네바 견다네세 샤라 펜바 연den도세 전에 택바 첨부라 몇시 연대 당시라 또 자주 선바게 샤기 교는 타다 봐야 연대배 탈신바 대화 탈신바 탈바다 탐지진배 공부받은 거에도 왜 삼을 당겨와라 얘네 따때는 택바신불라 몇시 연대 당신도 어째서다 그 연대를 마도 깨게 말하시라 소소지 맞나 소소지 맞도를 마도 몇시 개sol때 연대식으로 마도 견지에 깨요 말하시거라 어때는 때는 택바신불라 몇시 연대 당시도 어째서다 택바신불 매바데 연대리야 당하시면 하시래서라 연대 때려라고 연대지 요 말아 매 심수세데 그래서 미래를 일을 따긴 나오네시 라래 개쇼시에도 또 자주 선배켜시 매버라래 시에 개쇼시거라 어디인데고 연대리야 매버레스 뜻이도 또 저버도 말로네 되지 말로네 샬라 너바 견다네 샬라 펜바 연대도 시네 택바 첨부라 매버시베 연대라 당시 저래도 어디 택바 첨부 매버데 연대라 매버레스 연대리야 에네티 야고 말레스 저기 말레스 그래서 택바 첨부 때는 시에 교는 거보다 연대도베 탑 용수 쪽바 땡라스 택바 첨부 때는 시에 교는 거보다 연대 용수 쪽바 토에 탑시 땡겨 그래서 택바 멤버도 가서 뜻대요 말했어라 현재 저 타다 거야다 그거 영문보다 시제집을 강가시는 산je 봐도 야 그야더라 현재 교는 거보다 연대 두배 탑 용수 쪽바 땡기세 택바 멤버 때는 내 찾음을 마담베지 샹라 참바 공부를 저 공부를 지지들에도 와라 이나 차삼지를 마도 소설에게 세웠지 심지어 수인 심지어 탐지를 해야 돼 어디에 하고도 하자 심지어 탐지가 더 주셔야 돼 심지어 인버 탐지 되게 와라 마도 심지어 가가 모시에 상마 탐지 동일에 돼 팬다데 저치도 해봐요 말아 그러는데 그거 중앙에는 심지어 인버 탐지 되게 와라 마도 저게 들 개발치요 말아 뒤 심지어 탐지를 미세요라 심지어 탐지가 더 주셔도 레레레네 더 주셔요 말아 심지어 지게 더 주버이나 뒤 심지어 탐지가 더 주버지래 되어라 심지어 탐지가 된다 말도 그요 말아 끊고라 어디인데 가서라 어디나 특별 첨부라 몇시 연대 당시 샤서 어디서 거대 들으스 특별 첨부 때문에 값서 연대 기비 로세 닝도리야 까지 비교연한테 배워도 땡겨라 제가 멤버급서 처음지 때마다 지나실 때인데 되게 막 자주 미강가 삼로 찍고요 말아 당분에 닝도 전부터 깨도 말아 자 과랑 바보 소소 나네 소소 동에 터지 어디다시 근데 송도 야 되질라나
So here then in verse 369, it describes like if you ask, well, how is it that one can have this kind of disliking for qualities that causes one to deride the great vehicle or the universal vehicle? So here it says, what harms others are faults, what helps them are good qualities. Recognizing this, it is said that those who deride the universal vehicle dislike good qualities. So here it is the case that those on the universal vehicle hold others as more important than themselves. They have a kind of exchange of self and other that really means that without any sort of partiality towards all other sentient beings, they hold them to be important, to want to accomplish their aims, merely from them being sentient beings, merely from the fact that every single being wants to have happiness and doesn't want to suffer. And so when we look at the kind of scope of that, the Bodhisattva has extended that to all sentient beings, everyone that is a sentient being, really, but this is built upon a foundation of abandoning harm, recognizing that anything that is harmful to others is a fault, and anything that is beneficial to others, what helps them, what helps others, are good qualities. But we can have sort of scopes or different extents of that, right? If you accept that what is harmful to others is to be abandoned, and what is beneficial to others is to be adopted, or is something that is a good quality, a bodhisattva takes that due to their kind of mental fortitude, their compassion that encompasses all sentient beings, sees others, all from bugs to humans to gods to all of these other sentient beings as more important, and due to the kind of unbearable compassion that they feel, wishing to be able to free all of these sentient beings from their suffering, they're willing to remain within samsara in order to do that. Now, some this is not this kind of level of wishing to benefit others and eliminate faults is not taught in those kinds of scriptures of the lesser vehicle. It is only kind of taught within the universal vehicle, this level of a kind of strength of mind that really, upon observing any sentient being whatsoever, and wanting to thereby remove all faults and develop all good qualities. And if someone, due to their not thinking that is possible, or seeing this and sort of disliking it, well, then that would be that they dislike qualities. So here again, recognizing this, it is said that those who deride the universal vehicle dislike good qualities. If we've established that, again, harming others are faulty and helping them is a good quality, someone who looking at the universal vehicle and disparaging that really is demonstrating their dislike for these kinds of good qualities. And it is only then, again, those who are pursuing the kind of lesser vehicle, although they engage in activities that are beneficial to others, they eliminate faults, they don't have the kind of mental fortitude that takes this to its culmination, that brings it all the way to encompass all sentient beings. And so here it says that seeing that harming others is a fault and benefiting them is a good quality. And if you know that, and then deride the great vehicle, well, then it's logical to call that disliking good qualities, right? And so here within the great vehicle, the universal vehicle, one stops any sort of harm toward others and makes an attempt to benefit others through all methods completely. And that is taught in its entirety only within the great vehicle, the universal vehicle. Only a mere part of that is taught within the scriptures of the lesser vehicle. And so here we need, although it is the case that the scriptures of the lesser vehicle discuss like the need to have love and compassion, the need to benefit others and avoid harming them, and so forth. Again, there can be different extents to which one expands that kind of attitude. It doesn't talk about the complete methods for eliminating all faults and developing all good qualities, trying to accomplish the benefit of every single being just merely based upon their being a sentient being. And so someone needs a certain level of mental fortitude to be able to really pursue that kind of path, have that sort of strength of mind. And those, the lesser vehicle is taught for those who at the moment lack that ability to generate such mental strength, lack the ability to fully pursue that. And so someone who disparages, derides the great vehicle really is demonstrating a kind of animosity for good qualities. And this is based upon potentially a lack of their having that kind of mental strength and fortitude.
Ora, 다 somebody teaching maybe nimiti, depende buddhism. Tikar dosana, rangi tala metashira, shende rochi kawa kanse, shenjita, chikulia, shende tuya chikulia, tia keba meba, simje tamje keba meba, shende tuya chikulia katen kenge, chanju sembata suku jeba asigara. Yonde june tijidi, te sama yonde tamje june re, yonde tarshimba june re tora. Ta tele lagwa chinjue ke yomara, shenji tun tarshimba chuk tungenge, simje la nyirin che me genge. O tinde nini, lam kombala tene tarshini kyo kushe yonde kunde, simje shenji tun rubara toba meba, sanje ji koban toba yone, tele lagwa yonde che yomara. Tinde toya yogate nga ranzu sim delia, samlitangura yajen toya yogate. Simje rangshin mishiba ta, mishiba ngo rangshin ma yenge. Simje ngo de chagdangla soba nyamo ki rangshin ma yenge. Tila kagan ruji yoba. Oti samlitang ete samma yongse ra. Simde sim korang aranzu taga sa tu to zule yonde shibundo. Tse macho mato chi ramenda soya samma te soya ra. Simla kote mera yonde yora, simde tawe cha. Yu kanga shibe cha seshi dawa chire towa. Kole ya tatu yonde runga razun sosu nyamsu mala sochu matang mato. Ko yaru yaru chini ya shibu chini raya yogate. Botura. Simje tamze sanje ji rin yu se tira. Simje rangshin yu se ti tumanam lugu wase. Sosan kune chochir tawa se. Tishin nye me chir tawa se. Riyu china lu chengu tatu sanje nye buche ya se. O tatu matus ya. Tatu digre. Dinda. Rangi tala metashi shade rochi kawa kansi. Tichirwa shenji ten bashil kawa ka. Yonden jone tijin te. Tena te tang sekbandu. Ta telia tangwa chenge te. Telia tepe che su yira. Chodu gyuba che kwaya chiwa de. Ti lamka de ome dosi. Soso ke chimbatang de luyo da longchi chama chimbatang tukma na. Mi shenji bashi samlitang de ko chowa kuna 하고 말해 류 침바타네 초라 동네 조에 삼을 거래 용거 말해 sem진ing도 세대 가와거나 그 용거래 아 따들은 게 펜토 소삼게 류되게 펜토 소삼 가라즈네 시마라 가라즈네 시상다나 에요해요 말해 때 공다 잘 레도 미셈 세대 그 기로 십신 되어라 어 진데 갈소라 다들 다 님이데 rangi tala metashire. Shende rochi la kawa kaha imbate kansa sire. Yonde june teishin teisi, yonde tamje ke june. Ta te kungi ne tarshi barashi kari june ne jungura. Kiwa nande lap shishu regi wara. Yonde tenyamdo shirab yora, namju yora to, tabda shirab ni. O tena, te tanga sekbara, o tele tanga shingade. Yonde nyawa yada tandula soba pe. Tikwa mambu sawa tiki debu rang sekwa dhugu desi wara. Mia songu tunga nyanisi, nyangwa chigi desi wata. O tisonza tila kuwa matam na yaburis. Soso ki mene na kodi. Tikwa sanje chodi mambu sonda. Kibu chungu dhingi sara nyadu rang jese. Tikwa chenpo se, tikwa chenpo le. Parchin tikwa sanga, tikwa songu do. Mi samlu dramenda yawara. Kukab kura, kukab teta telia. 내가 때때 야가 배추지 마보여라 기타다 건담에다 송기와라 지단 매질 시시 지단 최지 시시네 된데 레라부 시시네 강가 찍듯이 soba chene zodo ra. Ti ma sunga de ko changpa da gyajin tuzu sanje chongo choma sunga bla shudo. Zambuli mi na liya. Pshurab chongjunga yo re. Pe chane. Pe ma ka chi chu o le shawi. Chu kang le shawi. Pe yabu shawi. Tina shin zambuli li yo mi la pe. Shirab chongo da dringda. Pe chambu yo sanje choma sunna. Ani mi mambu liya pe. Kukula dhukde sikdo. Ki member se che sabu ma song che chi na kibu chungi che de song che sha na ko zo de zo do ra ki mi ma bu che le te le lak be sim shu yang ge le ko ga ma bu chi me cha yo ra o ya ti la dia mo da sa ra
No,
o di la me di ra zao ko na shi le de da ya
no.
mm
So then third, we talk about in verse 370, then the kind of faults that come from deriding the universal vehicle. And so here it then reads, by being unconcerned about one's own aims, one takes delight uniquely in the aims of others. So here, a bodhisattva is one who casts aside their own aims and without any sort of distinction between close and distant, near and far, is then pursuing the aims of others universally, completely, and is doing so. This is the sort of the supreme kind of quality that one can have. This is the source of all qualities, one could say, in that it is the case that by taking these attitudes, again, of casting aside one's own aims and really having the kind of mental fortitude to pursue the aims of others, there's nothing superior to that. Taking that to its culmination in the state of omniscience and in the state of Buddhahood allows for one to be of most benefit to other sentient beings. And it is the case that our kind of nescience or our lack of understanding, our various attachments, our afflictions, and so forth, our animosity. It is the case that we have the ability to develop those kinds of qualities. Now, here, as it says, by being unconcerned about one's own aims, one takes delight uniquely in the aims of others. That is what someone who is pursuing the universal vehicle does. This source of all good qualities is the teaching of the universal vehicle, the means by which one can attain those kinds of supreme qualities. And hence, one who disparages it is tormented by unfortunate births. So here, when we think about other than our not really pursuing the development of these various qualities, we have the ability to do so, right? It is on the basis of developing the qualities of mind that a Buddha attained Buddhahood. The nature of mind is clear light. It is the case that the adventitious defilements have not penetrated the nature of mind. As it is said, the Buddha is all pervasive, that this suchness is indistinguishable, and that all sentient beings have this lineage or this nature. Thereby, they all have the potential to become fully enlightened Buddhas. And so it is the case that one who really has the kind of mental fortitude pursues the aims of others, the development of all good qualities, becoming a source of all good qualities in a way that is joyful. They don't experience this as being a burden or somehow suffering, but rather it is through the development of mind, the kind of change and improvement, increase in those qualities, that they are able to become a being that is of so much benefit to other sentient beings. And so here it is right that the highest kind of qualities come from such a being. It's the result of this sort of mental development. And now here, when it comes to the universal vehicle, that if one practices that completely, again, is the source of all of these good qualities, the Buddha taught many different levels of Dharma for many different different sort of occasions in accordance with the various dispositions of sentient beings. And so this is something that when Brahma and Indra initially requested the Buddha to teach the Dharma, they explained it as that among various potential disciples, of course, those like lotuses, there are some lotuses that don't fully make it to the surface. They bloom underwater. There are some that do make it to the surface, and there are those that come above. If you don't teach this Dharma, it would be a lost opportunity. There are those who have the kind of intellect, the capacity to be able to understand it. Although there are those who at this time won't be able to understand it. It would be a great loss if you were not to teach this Dharma for the benefit of those who have that kind of capacity. And so even if we are not ourselves yet able to practice the universal vehicle, someone who derides that is really going to burn in the lower realms. It is the case that they will accumulate a greatly heavy kind of non-virtue. So therefore, even if we're not yet at that kind of capacity, we shouldn't disparage this universal vehicle.
Oh, yeah. That is difficult. That is never those and do the door. That is Sholoka. Tunji did a
Right.
Debachani Sunye Besido. Debachani Sunye Bes. That don't ban you sober. Tender Koteva Yoche. In a Yankoti. Don't ban yes to do that. Bet Meverich. Kajo not a mother Kanga Chuna Imberich. Tender some done ko cheddar longer. And the lake you get on some gentle major now less over. There's some Meverich and the Chamba Ninja Chaju some commit to Kanga. Shukshunju Chane. Tagas Chilapshama Dongone. 동행양게 매베스를 차더라. 죄송하고 동반이를 대바천이나 야 산제 소바. 근데 송예베스 때 동반이 전다데 삼로 단다 예베 와게. 동바시에도 자원에 자와시 통게 팬은 제게 매버리지 건도에나 얼마 되겠어라. 송예베 지수 당시 퇴바 예세. 어. 지수 당시 퇴바 예세. 동반이를 땅에 시를 퇴바 예세. 저래. 또도 많이 돌아오신다면. 이봐 동반이를 대바 요체. 제 이제에 네네. 마디네 노네로 체바 매발 거네. 아니 교대 매베 정도 고아시거라. 교단 대비 남샤라 소바 매바. 다시 투나자마다 자신 내가 듣는데 가요 말이지. 근데 세나시거라. 대바전 내 손예배 지수 당시 색과 예세 어디 가시도서 매배 정도 고아 당세 지수시야 현대지 동반이라 다외지르 소소네 티 매바고 같이 티폰주라 같이와 동반이 세대야 말에 그 매바시고래 동반이 뭐 내주도 좀 말했을 텐데 약고 담배한 거라. 지시 당시 쳐봐야지. 동반이 개mel게 마무요라. 저 담배 랑신에 주 랑은에 주 가요 말은 가라도 삼블다 따버리스티요라. 랑은에다 랑신에다 랑은에 지매나네. 그게 맨도 삼설생기요라. 라고 가가 랑은에 요거래 랑신기. 나가랑 매나네 가셔대 소보다 셈다. 대sol을 때는 딱 봤으면 매나네 싫어. 나다 가서 싫어. 나를 이렇게 믿어. 르파 다치치체 이나 뜻이 부부다 뜻이 자지 제베도 소소 자와 제베는 로고야라 자지 제베 고치기도 만나기 책이 기부였지 강가서야 용기도 어딘데 가서라 지시 당시 쳐봐 예시 가서도 지시 동반이야 당시 쳐봐 예 동반이 봉하시고 당분의 고통이 빠셔버려 지대 동일이 대와 요리 되고 대와 요리 되고 삼단다는 말이니 체베 때매버 고샤래 지대 아무나 동문이 야오 말이세 스파 다스 그래서 다카니 누가 지대가래 대바전에 손예배 시시 지시 당시 처벌이 있어 니도 대바 자야 섹시나 다음에 실쇼 뮤지컬스 대바 지어서 동반이 매번 따야지 아니 라 동에 녀고를 쳇달로도 내 김제 매번 tin다나 녀석 그 동에 그 세기로 색바시로 날게로 매색번다시 소소 음 근데 당에 실쇼 뮤지컬 당에 생겨다 들려자 로치트 동반이 대바도 요르 그 삼단다 말이니 쳇다시 아니까 그 레키딜시라 지통 매게를 차라 싸우면 게르차라 개심분 맹게차 투나스를 따대 레기르시라 지금하라 어저 지데 다음에 실수 뮤지컬스 또 다음 생게 때고 디버스산에 내송을 통해 세바던 뮤지컬 라고요 말했습니다. 다음에 동반이 멤버 제바니래 렌데 여바 멤버 고에 동반이 라 대바치에 당하시라 제야 내송도 색발 돌레시나 근데 당에 동반일이야 그것들은 테네티셔야 돼 теле자 에네고 예선을 껴가서 봐 특별 모부사의 색발식을 했어라 신배 칠초에 색발 매직거리 색발에서라 매바 매도 신장 동반일에 매바 매나야 동반일이 돌아 꼬다번 매차세 제주 가수라 이미 전부를 해서 동반이를 삼루단에 배 전부를 해서 백개 전부를 해서 옛날 삼루단다 말이나 견내가 전부게 그래서 어디셔도 야 뒤질람나 대바들로 그걸로는 뒤래 네발랑 야 어디실람 야
So, here then, in the root verse 371, it says, even a faithful person is tormented due to misunderstanding it. Someone else who is hostile is tormented due to his animosity. If it is said that even the faithful person is tormented, what about the one who is hostile? So here, this has to do with emptiness. Even if there is someone who has a kind of faith in emptiness, they have a regard for emptiness, but due to their wrong thinking, they think that emptiness means that there's nothing whatsoever, right? So this will lead to a decrease in their love and compassion, the attitude of bodhicitta. If you think that, oh, well, there really isn't any sort of suffering being, it just emptiness means that there's nothing whatsoever. If you have that kind of mistaken idea that leads you to a nihilistic extreme, that causes you to disparage karma, cause and effect, think that there is no karma, cause and effect, and have this kind of understanding of emptiness, even though you regard it as, oh, this is taught in the scriptures, emptiness is seen as something important, but due to the way that you think about it incorrectly, you understand it to mean that there is no karma, cause and effect, or you think that this like other than there being these kinds of mistaken appearances, there is no functionality. This is a kind of misunderstanding of emptiness that will lead you to, again, due to disparaging karma, cause, and effect, you come into this kind of nihilistic view. And so here, there is then those who those who are hostile to this understanding of emptiness, like they completely misunderstand it and just abandon it altogether. And so the one who has that kind of faith in emptiness, but due to their kind of mistaken understanding, undermines karma, cause, and effect, well, then they are definitely sort of going to burn in the lower realms. And so here there's one that has a faith in emptiness, but they don't come to a correct understanding. They think like, well, if there's no inherent existence, if I don't exist as me, then there's nothing whatsoever. There's no karma, cause, and effect. There's no ability for there to be actions and agents and functions and so forth. But one is misunderstanding that even within there being merely designated existence, merely nominal designation, resignation, that actually suffices for existence. That's the way in which things function. So you have a kind of a faith in emptiness, but due to your mistaken thinking about it, you arrive at a mistaken understanding, that one is going to experience the torment, the sufferings, being burned in the lower realms. And so here, then then what need is there to speak about someone who is sort of hostile, right? So if it is said that even the faithful person is tormented by the kinds of misunderstanding of emptiness, then their disregard for karma, cause, and effect, they don't have that kind of regard for karma, and they don't feel the need to then act in respect with that. And then there is the other kind of person that are really just like, what need to speak of the person that just straight up has animosity toward this understanding of emptiness, or the teaching of emptiness. So here, even if one doesn't yet have sort of devotion or faith, a proper kind of longing to come to a realization of emptiness, it's very important that one doesn't disparage emptiness. So again, you can have a kind of faith in emptiness, but due to your wrong way of thinking, thereby end up tormented in the lower realms. So what need is there to speak of those who just have a kind of animosity from the beginning?
Oh, yeah, that is, this is also,
Mm.
oh, yeah.
So
Very
that's it for today. We are out of time then.
good. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for this very clear teachings, Ginla.
Mm.
And thank you, Katrina, for your translations. And we'll finish with some dedication verses now.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and the spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Tiram Gururam Namangalatam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Good.
Mm.